Okay, so it's videoing now. Okay, Diane, so I want to talk to you a little bit about Vanda. If you could tell me what kind of person she was, first of all.
That's a pretty difficult question to answer, what kind of person she was. It's very difficult. I think everybody you ask that to would have a different answer to it. Say the young people who tended to come around her, or the students who came to her and adored her. Her friends, in time I got to know a few of Vanda's older friends, her age group, and they always said that Vanda was liked very much to be social for a bit and then to be very much by herself. So I think she gave a lot of herself when people were around, but then she would always find ways to go and be by herself. What kind of person she was. She was very interested in giving what she understood, but she was also very interested in, in replenishing herself and being with herself. I don't know if that answers that question or not.
Yes, it does. Okay, so Vanda was introduced to yoga by Iyengar, but ended up working in a very different way. Why do you think that was?
Well, first of all, Iyengar and Desa Kachar were her first teachers. Why do I think she? Because I think she was interested in the creative process. I think she was, whatever information she got from those two teachers, she was interested in exploring it and understanding it at deeper levels.
Do you think that she works in a similar way to the way in which Iyengar does?
From my own experience, no. Just personally, but...
So if she hadn't been left on her own, as it were, when Iyengar stopped returning to Gestad and so forth, do you think this way of working would have been something she'd have identified or come across, as it were?
Would you ask that? I'm not sure I understood.
Well, Iyengar was coming over to Gestad every year, wasn't he, for about 7 years, and he's taught her for an hour.
3 years.
Oh, I thought they said 7 years in there. Anyway, okay, so, and he taught her for an hour each day, as well as teaching Krishnamurti. And then she said in the book, but it was only when I remained alone that this new way of working, this new revolutionary way of working. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that, whether she would have...
Well, she always said that she was learning yoga to help Krishnamurti. And I think she was, because she didn't have her own motives for the yoga, I think she was very free to explore.
Okay.
And when Krishnamurti worked with Iyengar, it was a little hard for him.
Yeah, he became exhausted.
She wanted to find a way of working that was good for him.
Okay. Would you say something about the role that Vanda's musicality played in her yoga?
See, now that's also the way I see it. So maybe other students of Vanda didn't have many students, but maybe her other students wouldn't see the same thing I saw in her work. But I found her way of working very musical in the body. I found she talked about a dance, an internal dance, but I saw there was such elegance in her movements. I saw it was very dance-like. So I think she used probably the same tools that she used to express music, she brought into her expression of the physical part of yoga, the asana part of yoga.
Okay. So could you say a little bit about that quote, "Movement is the song of the body"?
It's the song of the body. I don't know what I could say about it. It's, I agree with what Vanda said. I don't know how I could further say what else I could say about it.
Okay. When she was interviewed by Esther Myers at the very beginning of the video, Vanda says, the point is to set the mind free. Could you say something a little bit about that?
Well, I think any training, any creative training, artistic training that you do you're going to use the mind in a certain way. And I think that it harnesses the brain a little bit. It teaches it to be slow. It teaches it to be controlled, and so it has more refinement. Even the brain itself. I don't know. Sorry.
No, these are really horribly hard questions. Okay, so how did Vanda teach? How did she teach?
Well, she taught each person very differently. I mainly saw, she gave me lessons, and sometimes I would, say for the last 10 years, she didn't see many people the last few years of her life, but say more or less the last 10 years of her life, 10, 15 years of her life, people would want to come and meet her and have a lesson with her. So I would watch her teach them, and I found it was always different how she taught the person. Some people needed to be slowed down, some people needed to be awoken. Some people she had more hands-on, other people she had less hands-on. It just totally depended on the person.
What do you think was the most difficult thing for you about studying with Vanda?
What was the most difficult? She asked so much. She asked everything. And I guess the hardest part was finding what that everything was in myself. So she asked everything, and I wanted to please her, I guess, before I learned that it also pleased me. But, she was just a very hard taskmaker, and it was very important to live up to what she asked of me.
At one point, Vanda told you that she'd taught you everything she could, and yet you continued studying with her. Why was that?
Because I refused to let her stop teaching me. I didn't want her to stop teaching me.
Okay.
I guess that's a bit naughty.
Why was Vanda so averse to this way of working being called Scaravelli yoga?
Well, she thought it was silly. She didn't think it should have a name. And it definitely wasn't hers.
To what extent do you think Vanda was influenced by Krishnamurti?
Or Krishnamurti influenced by Vanda.
Yeah,
they were very much soulmates. I think they thought very much in the same manner, except I'd say maybe the music gave Vanda a freedom. Vanda was a female, Krishnamurti was a male. I don't know.
Why did Vanda think that this way of working would only ever appeal to a few people?
Because it's so difficult. Because it's such a process. It takes for the rest of your life.
Okay.
And as she said, it grabs you by the hair. There's a certain point it grabs you, and there's nothing you can do but keep giving the best of yourself to it. And that's difficult.
Yes. What was the most important thing Vanda said to you?
I don't know.
Why do you think Vanda asked you to study with her?
I asked her that one time. I said, I can't remember what I said. I said, because sometimes I'd think, Vanda was a countess. I'm just from North Carolina. I'm not anybody important. I asked her, I said, Vanda, why did you ask me to come and study with you? And she said, because I liked the way you looked. I liked your eyes. Don't remember. I don't know whether she was just kidding or I think we all see that we're drawn to one another. We could never put it into words why we're attracted to people. There's a sparkle in someone's eye, but I think it's a deeper connection than that. When we stop someone and say hello, I think it's more than just, what am I trying to say? a flight of fancy. I think it's much, you know, there's some reason that we don't even know about ourselves.
What happened when you first saw Vanda working? Yeah.
I had never seen anyone work that beautifully.
So tell the story then. So she'd seen you at a Tai Chi exhibition.
Mm-hmm. And she called me over. She called me over from across the room, and she pulled me down. She was sitting on the floor. She pulled me down to sit beside her very strongly. And she said, "My name is Vanda. I want you to come and see me." And she let my wrist go, and she was through, she was through with me. So I walked back to where I had been sitting, perplexed, and asked the person that I was with, "Who is Vanda?" And her response was a bit strange. She said, "Why?" And I said, "Because she called me over and asked me to come and see her." And she said, "She's a countess, she's very busy." So I tried not to think about it anymore. I didn't, because this woman was my teacher, so I let some time go by, and I don't know, several months later, someone asked me to go to lunch in the country at someone's villa. And there she was, she opened the door. And she took me very strongly by the wrist and took me into her room, placed me, and said, "Watch." And she started doing back bends. And I watched, and I don't know what went through my mind, except that it was the most beautiful yoga I had seen anyone do. And then she stopped and she said, "I want you to study with me, but I don't want you to tell anyone."
Why do you think she didn't want you to tell anyone?
Look, I think because yoga students get jealous of one another.
Okay.
They were, you know, my teacher knew Vanda, and I think there would have been jealousy there.
So you were still studying in the Iyengar way at that stage?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Why do you think Vanda wrote her book?
Because she was asked to do it. I don't know if she would have done it if she hadn't been asked to do it.
Because she says, there's one section in the book where she says, you know, what's the point? People might ask the question, what's the point of my writing this book when you have to experience it in order to get anything out of it? And she doesn't actually answer that question in the book.
Yeah. I think maybe, I guess the person, when they ask her, I guess at that moment, it appealed to her. Well, I have to say, this is something that in the process of thinking about writing something, one of the places that I came to within myself was, if you try to write what you have understood to the best of your ability, it gives you a kind of freedom. It empties you out a bit. So I think she might have been doing that even for the freedom that it would give her. I don't know.
Because almost like she might have been bursting at the seams with all the
maybe so
information.
Maybe it was a challenge to put something down on paper.
Can you talk a little bit about the title of the book?
Awakening the Spine?
Yeah, because she was going to call it something else, wasn't she?
Well, she wasn't sure whether to call it Awakening the Spine or Reawakening the Spine. So it was just arbitrarily titled Awakening the Spine.
What for you is the most memorable passage in the book?
I guess it's just the very beginning of the book where it says a revolution needs to take place based on one simple fact, that the spine divides between the fourth and fifth lumbar. And that, for me, has taken a long time to begin understanding what that means.
Thank you, Diane.
Oh, you're welcome.